so many people can say, oh, I haven't experienced trauma. I've never been assaulted. I've never been in a car accident
Yeah.
or whatever it is. But that's not what we're talking about. We're
Right.
talking about experiences where you felt overwhelmed. And when that happens, that impacts your nervous system.
Oh my goodness. Dr. Christine Baker, welcome to the Stop Faking Fine podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh, I just cannot wait to dive into all things nervous system regulation and healing from trauma. When my husband died 11 years ago, while I recognized that it was a traumatic event,
Yeah.
I did not have the bandwidth or honestly the time
Yeah.
to really give that the proper recognition that it needed.
Yeah.
And I did all of the things, air quotes, that I was told to do, go to therapy, pray, do this, do that. And
Mhm.
everyone on the podcast knows that I have a gut health journey and I've really kind of leaned into that. But you posted on Instagram because I went to talk therapy and I
Mm.
could not implement one thing that was shared with me. And this man was wonderful. He had a lot
Yeah.
of really great ideas, but I literally sat in those sessions and in my brain, I was like, I'm rubber and you're glue. And whatever you say
Mm.
is literally bouncing off of me. I had no bandwidth. And I know that I'm not alone here. But
Yeah.
then I found your Instagram page and you said something about why talk therapy is not enough to heal
Yeah.
from trauma. And I literally was like, oh, hey, new best friend. Hey, new best friend. It's like
Like, you're my people.
I was leaning in so hard and I was like, we have
Yeah.
got to talk about this more.
Yeah.
So
That's the thing. It's like with talk therapy, especially in the middle of grief is such a overwhelming experience for the nervous system. But like talk therapy in general for trauma survivors, it's so hard because the trauma survivor can be sitting there and thinking with their prefrontal cortex, the logical part of their brain, right?
Mhm.
Like, yes, therapist, I agree with everything you're saying,
Mhm.
but their body hasn't caught up yet with all
Mhm.
that logic, you know?
Yes.
And so their body, which is what responds in the moment to everything,
Yeah.
before we have time to turn on all the logic, is still
Yes.
acting like all the things that we don't believe yet, you know? So,
Oh, I
yeah,
want to talk so much more, on a so much deeper level about this
yeah,
because I would sit there and for me, I had no patience. I had stereotypical high cortisol, living in fight or flight. You have no patience. You don't sleep well. You're gaining weight despite all of your efforts. All of these
yeah,
things were adding up. And
yeah,
I was searching for solutions to help. And as I sat there, this wonderful therapist was like, Dana, when said child does something that is
yeah.
driving you bonkers, which by the way, in this moment, my children were 6, 8, and 10. So
Oof,
they were young and I have
yes,
boys and I love them with my whole heart and would not want anything differently. But
it's a
three,
lot in the midst of
yeah,
grief, man. Yeah,
three
absolutely.
boys, raising them alone. I didn't have my support system where I used to be able to call my husband to say, you have to come home for
Yeah,
10 minutes to help me rein
yes,
in this child and then you can go back to work or do all the things. But my support system was gone. And so this therapist would say, Dana, well, when you feel like that, well,
mhm,
count to 5. And I was like, okay, that's right. In the forefront of my brain, I should be
mhm.
able to count to 5. But unfortunately, before I get to 0.001, my mouth is already
Yes,
open and
yep,
I'm already by the time my frontal lobe comes on board, I'm already trying to
yep,
rein in the words. And I'm
yes,
looking at this child that doesn't deserve the person I'm showing up at in the
yeah,
moment.
yeah,
Doesn't he probably spilled milk on the floor and it
yeah,
was the last
yeah,
thing that I could handle. I was like, I cannot
yep,
handle one more thing. And so I've kept it together for my entire day. And now it's
yes,
6 p.m. and I'm not keeping it together for you.
yeah.
And I want to go back to that version of me and give her a hug for showing
I
up,
know,
right?
exactly.
But
Yes.
also, what are the tools that you teach that I could have implemented? Because, yes, the trauma was in my body. And I love just chatting about all of the different strategies. Like,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
could go back to that version of me, what would you share?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think that the first thing I would really want to talk about to that part of you is like just the definition of trauma
Yeah.
in regards to like when we're talking about nervous system regulation,
Mhm.
because trauma, I know, has a million different definitions out there, but when we're thinking about the nervous system, I think the best way to think about it is something is traumatic when your stressors overwhelm your resources. And
Oh,
so
that's very good. That's very good.
yeah. And so I think about this sweet mama who's been doing good until 6 p.m. She's used up all of her capacity. And
Yeah.
so when the milk spills, there's nothing else left. And so, and the reason that definition is important is because when the stressors overwhelm the resources, then our HPA axis, which is what controls our stress response system, is
Yeah.
what shoots out all of that fight and flight stuff. And
Mhm.
so I think that that first piece is super important because so many people can say, oh, I haven't experienced trauma. I've never been assaulted. I've never been in a car accident
Yeah.
or whatever it is. But that's not what we're talking about. Like, we're
Right.
talking about experiences where you felt overwhelmed.
Mhm.
And when that happens, that impacts your nervous system.
Mhm.
So I think
And
that would be the first thing I would want to share with her.
yes, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
And recognizing, I mean, I love to share that if you applaud what you're doing, you give yourself a high five for showing up the way that you show up and doing the best that you can and having grace
Yeah.
for yourself in that moment actually lowers your cortisol response because
Yeah.
you're happy about something and you're giving yourself that praise. And
Yes.
definitely in those moments, that wasn't who I was. I
Yeah.
wasn't applauding myself for anything. I was beating myself up at 6 p.m. for, and like I want to cry right now, but for
Yeah.
saying like why can't you keep it together, Dana? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
why can't you? And now I have the aftermath of my frontal lobe coming on
Yes.
board and saying, "Oh my goodness." Like,
Yeah.
"Oh my goodness."
Well, and the thing is too, Dana, like what I would say to that version of you too is that like you didn't actually have that much of a choice in that moment,
Right?
which I know sounds, especially without any kind of nervous system tools, like
Yeah.
when you tip over past the resource that you have, then um,
Mhm.
it automatically is going to pull in a fight response. So maybe you yell at your kids, a flight
Mhm.
response, like maybe you like just walk out of the room. I can't believe you, or a freeze response and you pull
Yeah.
out your phone and just kind of zone out.
Yeah.
And so our nervous system, and this is the thing that I would hope people could really grasp. This has been so incredibly healing to me and a lot of my clients is like all of these responses, fight, flight, and freeze, these are
Mhm.
not bad things. This
Right.
is like how your nervous system keeps you safe. And that sweet version of you had just experienced a lot of unsafety, like a lot of
Yeah.
really scary things.
Yeah.
And hard things. And so your nervous system was on high alert,
Yeah.
like I need to really protect Dana right now. And
Yeah.
so that was just your body taking care of you back then. Now, granted,
Yeah.
now we can now show our bodies like, hey, there's safety. We're
Mhm.
okay. We don't have to use these fight, flight, and freeze skills.
Mhm.
But I think understanding for me, like, these are just ways that my body is protecting me was
Mhm.
so like de-shaming. Like that
Yeah.
voice that's like, you're a bad mom or you're a bad
Yeah.
therapist or whatever is just like, no, like this is just my system trying to keep me safe.
Yeah. I
So
love that. I love the self-reflection to say it's just me. It's a teachable moment
yes.
for yourself, but you have to have the awareness to
Yeah.
make it that teachable moment. And so now you teach your clients, us, your patients,
Mm-hmm.
everyone how our bodies hold on to that trauma and what we can do to
Yeah.
calm your nervous system above and beyond the talk therapy that ended up
Yeah.
being a shaming experience kind of for me because I
Yeah.
couldn't implement the things. So
That's right. Yep.
what are some of the ways outside after I give myself grace? right?
Yes.
In that
Yeah.
moment for saying, okay, your nervous system is trying to protect you. What are some other things that you share that we
Yeah.
can lean into?
I think that there's two primary like roads I would go to answer this question. So I think the first road is become a detective of your own nervous system. Like really start to understand. Like
Yeah.
I want you to think about those three things: fight, flight, and freeze.
Hmm.
What do I look like when I'm in fight? Like do I have tension in my jaw? Does my face get
Yeah.
really hot? Really start to notice like the bodily cues of fight. What do I look like when I'm in flight? What does that anxiety feel like inside my body?
Hmm.
And then what do I look like when I'm in freeze? And really start to like notice those. The ideal is that we can notice those things that happen at the very beginning of that
Hmm.
response so that we can catch it before I yell at my kid for 15 minutes, right?
Hmm.
So it's
Hmm.
like I think that's number one is like really becoming a detective of your own nervous system
Yeah.
and knowing your own cues. And
Yeah.
once you've done that, then we can really work on regulation. And so I think there's tons that I could say about regulation, but if I was going to like pull it down into some basics, I would say
I
that,
mean, how many hours do we have? Like
I
4?
know
Is that
that's
what
right.
is
Exactly.
this episode going for 4 hours? Like, are we going to dive
I
into
know.
all
We
of
could
it?
do like a weekend podcast to talk about that. But yeah, like I think the biggest thing is we are trying to regulation is trying to help your body come back to the present
Hmm.
through cues of safety.
Yeah.
Okay. Because what trauma does is it throws us into the past through like flashbacks or viewing the present through the lens of my history, things like
Mhm.
that. Or it throws us into the future through like anxiety and worry about what's next
Yeah.
and future tripping, right? And
Yeah.
so what we're trying to do is be right here in the here and now. And we do that through connecting to cues of safety in the present. And so there are two primary skills that I teach every client to help them do this. The first one is grounding, which is a lot of people have heard of grounding before.
Hmm.
Ultimately, this is finding safety or resource in your body. And
Hmm.
so, some questions you could ask yourself to help with grounding would be things like when I do a body scan, where in my body feels pleasant to be with? Like
Hmm.
maybe my feet are really comfortable in my slippers. That could be an answer. But a lot of my clients, especially people who have experienced a lot of trauma or chronic stress, if I ask them that question, they're going to say, "Ain't nowhere feel good in my body."
Right.
You
Well, that's
know?
kind of that's like I was thinking to myself, well, what would I say now? And
Yeah,
what would I have said then?
yep,
And even when you talk about being self-aware, I have been like I was full disclosure, like we're all friends on
yeah,
this podcast, so I'll just hang out all of my dirty
yes. Let's
laundry.
hear it.
But I have been a teeth grinder
Yes,
for as long as I know. And it wasn't
yep,
until I learned to calm my nervous system through the gut and the gut brain axis and the
yeah,
supplements that I
beautiful.
take that I have released that. But
Yeah,
prior to me having that strategy, I had no
hmm
clue. Like dentists would say, it would be really great if you would stop, clenching your jaw. And again, I'm like, not
yeah.
helpful information because
And
I realize that
you're
I
like,
should
I
not.
would love to stop
I
clenching my
I
jaw.
would,
Yeah,
but you do it subconsciously. So when you
yeah,
talk about where do I feel grounded in my body, you don't
hmm
mean going outside to put your feet in the grass.
yeah. No, not and which I do that quite often. I will say I
Mhm.
love putting my feet in the grass, so I'm a big fan of that. But I do think that we're trying to connect to some resource inside. Okay.
Mhm.
Because ultimately, when I'm having a trauma reaction, it's because remember, stressor is overwhelming resource. And so
Mhm.
I need to increase the resource. And so I'm going to do that through with grounding, trying to find something that feels okay inside. So for people that would answer that question, nowhere feels good inside.
Right.
I think what I would probably say to them is there's two options. One would be like maybe they would say everything feels tight.
Yeah.
So then I would say, okay, so your chest feels really tight. I wonder if you could find a place in your body that feels 5% less tight than your chest. And
Okay.
then they would do a little scan and see. And most of the time people can find that. Like they can
Yeah.
see like, yeah, my chest is the worst. my hands aren't as tight as my chest. Okay, let's just focus on your hands for a minute.
Okay.
So do you see how we're like searching for resource instead
Mm-hmm.
of like focusing on the activation of it all?
Mm-hmm.
So
And
I
then
think,
once you find that place, if you're like, okay, my
yep.
chest is really tight, my
Mm-hmm.
hands are less tight.
Yes.
Now, or what do we do? Like, let me ask you another question for all of the fingernail pickers that live in my house.
Yes.
What?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm the only female in
Yeah.
a household of men that
Yes.
don't need nail clippers because they just like, or
They chew those things.
you bite your nails or you do whatever. Like,
Yeah.
so that would be the most tense part,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Is that the way that I'm connecting the dots? That's what's the most tense part in their body. And how could they calm themselves without
Mhm.
doing that subconsciously?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I don't know if I've ever thought about the somatic response to nail biting. But I think what initially comes up for me when I think about it is like there's probably jaw tension that's trying
Hmm.
to like find some release in the compression. And I mean, not to get too Freudian, but there's probably some oral fixation stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
like trying to resource through the nurture of like connecting to your mouth because
Yeah.
like obviously as babies like that's something that's
Uh-huh.
very nurturing. But I think even with that, even with nail biting, if that person could take a second to like feel their feet in their shoes, notice their seat in their chair, like trying to connect to something resourcing and grounding, it could help relieve the, because I think nail biting is like it's trying to relieve some tension,
Yeah.
you know? And so being able to pause and be with the resource in your body could help you stop focusing on the activation, which might be in the nails or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, but okay, so to come back to like like if someone says like, yeah, there's tightness in my chest, but my hands are less tight, then I would just say, yeah, like let's focus on your hands. Notice how your hands feel less tight and just like take in as many sensations about your hands as you can.
Okay.
And then we would just say, and as you're with that, what do you notice next? Which is so simple.
What do I notice next? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. And so then you're just talking about your hands and trying to like the purpose of that is to have a calmness feeling in your
So the
body is what you're searching for.
so the purpose is you're practicing interoception, which is just this ability to notice what's happening inside.
Mhm.
And just by doing that, you're giving your nervous system more resource. Because every time I practice interoception and I notice body sensation,
Mhm.
then I'm connecting to the here and now. And that is what helps my body regulate. And remember, I'm here in 2024. I'm not back in that painful memory in
Right.
2020, you
Right.
know? And so it's all about being in the here and now. It's not necessarily that you're going to have some major insight as you focus on your hands. You're
Yeah.
just going to notice that when you focus on your hands, your shoulders drop a little, or your gut
Yeah.
loosens up a little, or
Yeah.
you're able to move a little bit more, not as frozen, you know?
I love
And
that. So for if I go back to my example of me
yeah,
in the kitchen and
yes.
you are in I don't know if it's fight, flight or free. I guess it's fight because
If you were
ho-
yelling at your
I'm
kids,
hollering
I'm
at
not sure.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I'm hollering at somebody. So I guess
yes,
I guess I got my gloves out and I'm ready to
that's
fight.
right.
But in that moment, if I could have what? Taken a deep breath.
I think that if you could have first, that first line of being a detective of your nervous system, you would probably have noticed that the heat rushed up to your face before words came out of your mouth.
Mhm.
Like you would have known some of those bodily cues that would be like your warning flags
Yeah.
that things are about to escalate into one of those nervous system responses. So I
Yeah.
think that would be like the first bit. So you could catch it earlier. And then the second thing that I would recommend, and I do this all the time with my children because I have three kids, 5 and under. And so I
So
love
you're
them to
very
pieces.
familiar. You're very familiar. You're very familiar.
Yeah, the spilled milk is like very real at our house. But but I do this all the time is I literally will just like wiggle my toes in my shoes. I'll notice the shape of my spine And then I'll orient to my environment, which was that second skill that I mentioned. So I'll start to like look out. I normally like count the squares on my kitchen cabinets.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
it's so simple, Dana. Like that's the thing about, that's why I'm so passionate about nervous system work,
Yeah.
is because it is the simplest, if we want to call them interventions,
Yep.
that have this like profound effect on how you move through life, you know?
So as your kitchen is complete chaos and you can see the milk almost in slow motion
Oh
about
yeah.
to be spilled because
Yeah.
people are moving too fast, no one's paying attention to what's going on, no one wants help because they've got it, right? You've
The
got
milk is
children
not
that
in the safe place.
it's not it's not
I say that to my kids all the time. Put the milk in the safe place.
it's not it's not in a safe place.
No.
And so you are standing in the kitchen and you are wiggling your toes and
Yep.
you are like, "Oh, I bought these beautiful, wow, 1, 2, 3, there's 6 panel cabinets and they're
Yep.
gorgeous." And you're
Yep.
counting the panels and
Hmm.
that is doing what in your body?
Yeah. So orienting is actually very regulating for the nervous system, because I didn't actually say this earlier. I think this is an important piece. So the nervous system is your internal safety scanner.
Mhm.
So every time you walk into a space, your nervous system is scanning through your eyes to see, is this space safe or not? How do I need to
Yeah.
respond right now? And so when I orient, which is like just taking in my environment, which would be counting my cabinets in this example,
Yeah.
I am showing my nervous system like, it's okay. Like, here's some resource, here's some safety. You're
Yeah.
not under siege right now, you
Yeah.
know? And so I'm obviously not going to orient to the milk on the floor.
Right. No,
Like,
no,
I'm going to,
or the milk that's not in a safe space. Like I
I
am
know, that's
going
right.
that is my new favorite phrase. Like that is put the milk in a safe place. Put the milk in a
Yes,
safe
which
place.
means like a foot from the edge of the table, you
Right.
know, like it has to be pushed in. But yeah, like I have certain things in my home now and certain things in my office that are just visually resourcing to me
Yeah.
because I've used them as like little safe spaces so often now. So my cabinets are one. Like looking, a great one is looking out at tree lines outside your
Mhm.
window. Like that's or seeing a tree blow in the breeze outside your window. It's like, yeah, there can be a lot of chaos happening over here, but I'm just taking a moment and noticing some like peace outside.
Mhm.
And that stabilizes my nervous system
Oh my
from
gosh. Does it
being,
have anything to do with like being grateful? Like looking outside and saying, I'm so grateful for the trees? Or is it literally just orienting on something else?
it's a great question. So I actually think that this is a huge part of why gratitude practice is so helpful, is because for trauma survivors, because they have been hurt
Yeah.
so often, their nervous system is scanning for threat all the time.
Yeah.
Like that is what it's kind of geared towards.
Yeah.
And what a gratitude practice does is it forces you to scan for resource.
Mhm.
And so you're using orienting through
Mhm.
this gratitude practice. So
Mhm.
I think that it's wonderful because what we know is that all of that activation that's held in the body when you experience trauma or chronic
Yeah.
stress, it needs to be held by a lot of resource. And
Mhm.
so a gratitude practice is a great way
Mhm.
to engage that.
We need all of the tools and all of the strategies because not I am such a huge proponent of there's not one thing. It's not
No,
one
no.
thing that is going to get you to where you want to be. It's a combination of a
Yeah.
lot of things that work. I'm obsessed with this conversation.
Yeah.
What made you interested? Like what started the spark to get your master's degree in counseling and then
Hmm.
specifically to really seek out the trauma
Yeah.
certifications and
Yeah.
the somatic experience? Like what brought you
Yeah.
here?
I grew up in a broken home. So I come from like a family of divorce. I come from a addicted family system. So experienced a lot of childhood trauma myself.
Mhm.
And when my little 18-year-old baby self went to see a therapist, went to her first Al-Anon meeting, which I'm so proud of that little 18-year-old.
Right? Yes. Let's
Oh my
applaud
goodness,
her. Let's give
like
her a big
so
hug and
brave.
applaud her. Yes.
It's
Yes.
so brave. And when I did that, it was just such a like overwhelming gift to be able to talk about the hard things. Because
Mhm.
when you're raised in an addictive family system, we don't talk about things, you
Yeah.
know? So then I just realized like this is something that I want to offer people. I want to offer
Yeah.
people like that safe space to be able to talk about the hard things. And so that was what kind of led me to getting my master's in counseling. And
Yeah.
then the trauma stuff, I was working a lot with sex addiction. I actually am a CSAT, so I'm a certified sexual addictions therapist.
Mhm.
And I just realized that pretty much all of that on both sides, the person struggling with addiction and the partner, the person who's
Mhm.
been betrayed, it's all trauma stuff.
Yeah.
And so like I needed way more training to be able to do that. And so I was a therapist for like 10 years and I was experiencing a lot of burnout in my
Mhm.
career. I was holding all of this hard for people and I was exhausted and
Yeah.
numb and all those things you described earlier when you were speaking about your journey. And I just knew that I needed something different. And I
Mhm.
had heard so many good things about Peter Levine, who is the founder of Somatic Experiencing. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this thing. It's a 3 year, it's a 2.5 or 3 year long training program. So it was quite a commitment, but it has truly changed my life. Like not
Yeah.
just my professional career, but like how I interact with my children, how I interact with my husband. It's all been how I interact with my own story. Like it's all
Yeah.
been radically changed. And so
Ooh,
I'm
well, I
incredibly
wanna know
grateful.
more. I wanna know more about all of those things. But yes,
Yeah.
I find it so interesting that really as grown-up women, like we all end up in a place that you are past. You were healing
Yeah.
yourself first, right? You were healing
Yeah.
yourself
Yes.
first. And now once you found the healing, you get so
Yeah.
passionate about sharing with others to help them, help
Yeah.
you, the listener, get through your traumatic experience faster,
Yeah.
better. Like I am obsessed with fight or flight hormones, not being
Yeah.
stuck in fight or flight because for years I fumbled in that space and I knew there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way. And I think back to your point of when you grow up in an addictive family, you don't talk about things. And I think that it's broader than an addictive
Yeah.
family. Like I my have did
Yeah.
not come from a family of addicts, but we don't talk about anxiety. Like
Mm.
you give it to God and you call it good. And I was like,
Yeah.
that is a tool.
Yes.
That is one tool and it is
Yeah.
an amazing tool and I love Jesus and I
Yes.
have a devotion practice and all of those things, but it's more tools than that. And
Yeah.
for you personally, so tell me more about how that changed the way that you interact with your kids, that you interact
Yes.
with your husband, that you interact with
Yeah.
yourself.
I know, man. So many changes. I'll start with myself and then I'll move out. So like I think the main way that it's changed how I interact with myself is more grace and understanding
Mhm.
for choices I made in my history, but also like when you're overwhelmed and have a hard day and you do yell at your kids still,
Yeah.
like of course I ran out of resource, and
Yeah.
so I think just lots of understanding of my own reactions to things, I think would be
Mhm.
a huge piece. And then I think the second thing that I would say, and this is huge, is because I'm more connected to my body and
Yeah.
like what I'm feeling in my body, um, it has really helped me be able to catch when I'm starting to feel overwhelmed. And I seriously now, and this took time, but like I really resource pretty immediately. Like
Yeah.
I feel like, which is so different because growing up, addictive family systems are going to be really in a lot of freeze state
Mhm.
because of all the numbing that's happening. And so, when things would get overwhelming, I would just shut down. I would like
Yeah.
go away. That was my primary way of engaging.
Leaving,
Yeah,
like, "Bye,
yeah.
bye,
I'm
peace
just
out,
like, I'm
I'm
gone.
done."
I'm staring off into space,
Yeah,
like I'm not here. And so being able to notice little bits of overwhelm and then resource myself through grounding and orienting, it's like I can stay present. And
yeah.
that changes everything. That changes how you show up in your marriage. That changes how you
Mhm.
show up in parenting, in the therapy office. I mean, that's huge. And so I think shifting from, and I still have moments where I go into freeze, of course, but like my primary thing when I'm overwhelmed is how do I resource? What resource do I need right now to help support this
What
activation?
is your go-to for that? So when you find
Mhm.
yourself I resonate so much with this because there were so many years after my
Uh,
husband died that I had to take a nap every single
Yeah.
afternoon. I would get
Yeah.
to a place where I was overwhelmed,
Yep.
and even before my husband died, he would crack up to be like, "Dana, we were just having like some heated argument, or we were like
Mhm.
like I was overwhelmed, whatever
Yes.
situation was around." And my answer every day of the week is to take a nap. Like I
Yes.
can
Yes.
on a dime, I can
Yeah.
fall asleep
Yeah.
because that was my freeze. That was the
Yes.
way that I
Mm.
could remove myself. So now when you talk about when you feel the overwhelm,
Yep.
what is it? Like we talked about wiggling your toes in your shoes and counting cabinet
Mhm.
doors. But is
Yes.
it that even right now, that's what you're doing when you feel overwhelmed?
Yeah, I use those skills all the time. So some of my favorites, I'll tell you,
Yeah.
is wiggle toes and shoes. I do think that's something. Pressing your feet into the ground and
Hmm.
remembering that the I love to think about the idea. This is so it's going to sound so hippy dippy, but like when I press my feet into the ground, it doesn't give way,
Yeah.
like there's stability underneath me,
Yep.
and I don't know if your followers are a lot of believers, but I love the concept of that when I'm engaging my faith,
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
that God is our like strong foundation, and
Yeah.
he doesn't shake. There's no shaking, and
No.
so anyway, so I think that that's one.
Yeah.
I also orienting is a huge thing. So looking out at tree lines, feeling the breeze on my face, all that kind of stuff. Another one that's super helpful is joint rotation.
Ooh.
So I know this is very simple. So you can do this with like wrist, elbows, shoulders, any of that stuff. The reason this is so helpful is because trauma is actually stored in our joints.
Really?
Um, I know, which again sounds hippy dippy, but I want you to think about it. Like if someone were to do a jump scare to you right now, like
Yeah.
you would go, and like notice where the tightness is. It's like there's like some wrist stuff, there's like elbows, there's shoulders, like it's all kind of like in these spaces. And so
Uh-huh.
if we can like open up these spaces through some slow joint rotation, then we're more grounded. Or we have more capacity, because if all, let's just think about this for a second. Like if all of these spaces, these joints are blocked, then the only capacity that my body has to deal with activation is right here in the middle.
Yep.
But if I can like open up all these spaces, then I have my whole body as a resource. And
Oh my
so,
gosh. So like as you feel the tension, you feel
yep,
you feel it brewing. We all
yes,
feel this brewing in your
yeah,
body. You
hmm
literally do like a shoulder roll or a wrist
yes,
roll and
yeah. So the one for me that's I use all the time is my ankles, just because I can be sitting in session and do it. But here's the thing, it's not just doing it, it's you're doing it slow, and you're really noticing every muscle that helps you make that rotation. Because that's that interoception that we talked about, like really noticing body sensation.
yeah.
And then I would go both ways with it. So like clockwise, counterclockwise.
I mean, I'm doing it
And
right now. I kind of love
yeah,
it.
yeah, it is like it's so basic, but it is incredibly helpful. Like here's a test. If you don't believe me, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a moment, notice how both of your arms feel, and then I want you to very slowly like do your wrist in a rotation, like maybe 3 circles each way, and then do your elbow like you're stirring a cauldron, both ways, and then do your arm like a windmill both ways, and do that all very slow, really taking in the sensation of it. And then I want you to just notice what the difference is in your left arm and your right.
Yeah,
Like every time I
my
do
right
that,
arm feels a whole lot less stress.
yeah. And like mine feels more awake. It actually feels longer when I do
Yeah.
this. Like it feels like there's like more length almost, which sounds
Yeah.
weird. But just try it. Like I know the listeners are probably like, what is she talking about? But like it
Try
really
it.
does make a difference. Yeah.
Yeah, try
Yeah.
that.
Very helpful.
I love that, and I love that you mentioned when I asked how has that affected your relationship with your spouse and with your
Yeah.
kids, and your answer was that it started with you,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
doesn't it always start with us?
Oh,
From,
totally.
the saying of like, if mom ain't happy, ain't nobody happy.
Mhm.
Like, although that's
Yeah.
a dumb saying, there is a responsibility for us to care for ourselves. And
Yeah.
that doesn't happen, or it's very common for you to take
Mhm.
yourself off the list of things to do and worry about everybody
Yes.
else first. But these things that you're sharing are so simple.
Yeah, so simple. And the truth is too, especially with parenting, I say this to parents all the time. I say this to myself all the time. I cannot expect my children to be regulated if I'm not regulated, you know? And
100%.
so if I'm coming at my child with angry eyes and loud voice, then guess
Mhm.
what their nervous system picks up on? Like,
Mhm.
oh, mom believes that there's a threat right now. And so I need to
Mhm.
respond with a threat response.
Mhm.
And so, like, they are literally learning how to engage their own nervous system responses through watching mine. And
Mhm.
so it's incredibly important to be able to really be intentional about grounding. And for anyone else who, like I mentioned, I do have an adopted daughter. So I have a kid from a hard place, if you're familiar with Karen Purvis's work at all. But she
Well, you have 3 kids, right? You have
I have 3 kids, yes. And what my eldest is adopted. And she has, some sensory issues and things like this and attachment stuff. And I think for so long I had this belief that like there was something wrong with me, with our relationship, like because we were just kept running into roadblocks with her. And what I've learned through doing all this work is like, no, her nervous system is just really dysregulated,
yeah.
like poor little honey, she's like stuck in fight all the time. And
Yeah.
so it has been a absolute game changer to when I'm like about to have a moment with her to like discuss a bad behavior for me too. Wiggle my toes in my shoes, rotate my shoulders a little bit, get in my body,
Yeah.
and be more settled because she's reading it all over me. Like she's reading that
Right.
I'm more settled. And so
Right.
she knows that, oh, okay, we're safe here. Like I don't
Yeah.
have to overdo fight, you know?
Yeah.
So it's been amazing.
That
Such
is
a gift.
one, it's just a huge thing because we can't hide any of the tension that's in our body. You can't
Mm-mm.
hide it. Everyone can see it or
Yeah.
sense it. And I think a lot of times like people will giggle about RBF or your, resting
Yeah.
brat face or whatnot. But
Yeah.
it's like you have to tell your face that you are
Hmm.
excited and that you're not
Yeah.
stressed and that you're not tense. And I love all of the different strategies, the wiggling your
Yeah.
toes, the counting, the
Hmm.
cupboards, the looking at the tree line.
Yeah.
For years, lived in the house where my kids could sense that my
Yeah.
tension was high because I was in this fight or flight space.
Hmm.
And I didn't come at any home conversation with grace. I came at
Yeah.
it like, oh my gosh, like, why did you do that?
Yeah.
Yada, yada, yada. And I have found nervous system regulation. Like, do you teach anything in your practice about nutrition or about like the
Hmm.
power of the gut? I've learned just a lot about the serotonin and
Yes.
dopamine that comes from the gut. And I have a success story with getting out
Hmm.
of fight or flight with nutrition,
Yeah.
with the supplements plus eating kind of a different way to just
Yeah.
keep your cortisol hormone in balance so that
Yeah.
now rather when I feel anxious, I don't go from a 0 to a 300. I go
Yeah.
from a
Yeah.
0 to a 3 and I can manage the
Huge. Yeah.
3. And now when I'm
Yeah.
at the 3, I can even say, okay, let's wiggle my toes.
That's right. Yeah.
Let's do all of these other strategies and
Hmm.
let's show up at a 1 instead of a
Yeah.
3 because isn't that what we're all trying to do? Like, how
Yeah.
can you show up, and I love
Yeah.
to say this, at your absolute best every
Yeah.
single day? And we need all of the strategies. So
Yeah.
in your teaching, do
Yeah.
you teach anything about nutrition or other
Yeah.
exercises?
Yeah. So I don't have any like training in nutrition. However, when I was doing my SE training, one of our trainers, he actually made this really big statement and I wrote it down because it had such an impact on me. He said, there is no way for your nervous system to be fully regulated if you have an unhealthy gut.
Yeah.
And so
100%.
because he said that like when we're not fueling ourselves in the
Mhm.
ways that we need to, like with diet and hydration and all of that, the body is taking that in as threatening. It's like
Yeah.
the body is saying, oh, I don't have what I need. Like I'm under fueling or I'm dehydrated. And so I need to be in a threat response.
Mhm.
And so there's always going to be that little bit of underlying threat response if we're not attending to things like hydration and
Yeah.
diet. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I
huge
love
piece.
that. I learned I'm a nerd. Like I like I love nerding out on the science of
Yeah,
nutrition. And part of the reason that I came to that, I think, first before the
yeah,
breathing techniques or the leaning into any of the other things was that when my husband died, we were two of the fittest
yeah.
people of our group. And I was like
Mm-hmm.
of our friend group. And I was dumbfounded for
Mm,
how how did we get to this place? And
yeah,
then
yeah,
how am I staying in this fight or flight place? And because I have a background in exercise and nutrition and whatnot, I
yeah,
like leaned hard into that and into
yeah.
looking through that. And I tweaked our diet so small, like
Mm,
little tweaks with adding more healthy fats and whatnot.
mm-hmm.
And that was one huge part of me getting out of fight or flight. And then
Yeah.
I started on this supplement beverage that I talk about all of the time that
Mm-hmm.
helped to rebuild the gut. And
Yeah.
I think most of us have no idea whether your gut is healthy or not healthy. We
Mm,
assume that the health of your gut is like, oh, well, I pooped today, so I'm good. Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
like
Mm-hmm.
I'm good. And it's like the more and more science keeps coming out that the gut regulates so much of your nervous system, of the
Yeah,
way of your energy, your mood, your ability to lean into all of these things.
yeah.
I find it fascinating. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're listening and you want to learn more about that protocol, you can literally go to my website. It's danalewis.com/supplements. And you can learn about this drink. It's literally called Happy Juice because it creates more serotonin and dopamine.
Love that.
And just for me, it was the intervention that hit hard, like
Yeah,
helped the most, so that
yeah.
now I can be obsessed with, okay, what are the other things that
Mm-hmm.
can help us show up even better? And you have a number of like nervous system trackers and
Mm-hmm.
other things. Like what are the steps that you teach in these programs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, so like some of my on my Instagram, some of the freebies that I have,
Mhm.
are I do have a nervous system tracker. So remember how I said there's like kind of these two steps to working with a dysregulated nervous system. And the first one is to become a detective of your own nervous
Yeah.
system. So that is what this tracker does. It's a free workbook and it really helps you kind of learn and understand your own nervous system.
Yeah.
And so that's a resource I love to pass along to people. I have some little cards, both digital and printable, for couples. So they're just little statements that you can say to your partner to kind of help have more co-regulation of your
Ooh,
nervous
read them to me.
systems.
Read them to me.
Oh, yes, I would
What are
love
some
to.
of them?
Some examples, your emotions are safe with me. It's okay to take your time before you answer.
Yeah.
We're a team. We'll get through this together. I trust your judgment.
Yeah.
We all need help sometimes. That's okay. And so,
Yeah.
like on the cards, and again, this is like I'm showing Dana the printable version, but there's also a digital one because I know that no one is going to print them.
Well, you
Is
could print
it's
them out, and does anyone still have a refrigerator that with, like, magnets where you could, like,
I
hang things out? Like,
know.
that would be those had a super big place in a life we had, we could tape them to the refrigerator or
I
something, but yes.
know. I know.
I
It'd be
love
great.
having the prompts, though, to share
Hmm.
you're safe, and I think those could
That's right.
be applicable even with your kids when you come about.
So many people have said that. Like they've said, I use these cards with my kids, like these statements, just to help. Because the whole goal is if the nervous system is our internal safety scanner, how do I make
Yeah.
this person that I'm in relationship with feel safe?
Yeah.
And so there's just some little phrases that you can use to do that.
Yeah.
So
So when you come I have another question for you. So when you
yeah,
come into a situation where whether it's a child or a partner or a friend that
yeah,
you can clearly tell because we're detectives and
yeah,
we've picked up on what they're putting down. They're
yes,
at a 20 or a 300.
yeah,
Like you can tell
hmm,
that you are walking in or in a
Yeah.
situation where they're not okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How can you coach us through that situation just by reading the cards saying you're safe here?
Mhm.
Like, what are some things that we
Mhm.
can do
Yeah.
as parents, as spouses, as best
Yeah.
friends to help the person that has not done
Mhm.
your training, is not a
Or like any
patient,
nervous
not
system work.
not
Yeah.
yeah, not a
Mhm.
patient, and maybe
Yeah.
not even into listening to, you know what I mean? Not it
Yeah. Yeah.
not in, because I think that's a thing also, like,
Mhm.
"Listen, Christine, I'm fine. I don't wanna hear what you have to say." Like,
I I know. Yeah.
how do we help that woman?
Yeah. Yeah. I think a great question is, I wonder if you would be open to sharing. I would say invitational language is huge. Like never
Yeah,
like, hey, let's do this. Like more, hey, would you be open to sharing? Because that invitation really shows the nervous system like I have choice. Trauma
yeah,
quite often takes your choice away.
yeah.
And so we're reestablishing like that autonomy. So, hey, I'm wondering if you might be open to sharing how I can best support you right now. Would it feel better to talk about what's going on? Would it feel better for me to just sit in the room but not say anything? Do you need space? Like, I think it's like asking them ultimately what's going to help you feel safe.
I
Um,
like that.
and so finding different ways to say that depending on the person.
I like the invitational language because
Yeah.
I know that I have been on the kind of receiving end of that, and you want to come at it and be like, "Oh, so I can see you're anxious." That's like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
not
Yeah.
not going to help anyone. So
Yeah. Yeah.
inviting the conversation, and then what
Hmm.
if, I don't know, like, can we take that one level deeper? Like, what if
Hmm.
that person is not receptive to
Like if
what
they
you're,
say, I just need space right now or something.
yeah, or if they come
Yeah.
back and they're like hollering at you and you're like,
Mm.
okay, well,
Yeah.
you're not
Yeah.
accepting my invitation.
Yeah.
How do you gracefully
Hmm.
kind of help them step down?
So first off, if they were to say like I just need space, I think I might just say like, okay, well I'll be in the other room. And if you want to come talk, you can. So there's
Yeah.
no like requirement, you know. So I would give space because sometimes that is what people need. Like they just
Yeah.
need some room to breathe,
Yeah.
you know. So that is one thing. But then two, if I'm trying to offer support and grounding and they're just getting more and more angry as I do that, then I
Mhm.
think I would probably say like, hey, it feels like now is probably not the best time. So I'm wondering if maybe we could try this again tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Like,
I
because here's the thing is, if someone is engaging with you when their lid is flipped, we're not getting anywhere. So,
Right.
you know, and so it's like if I can if they're if with some gentle offerings we can kind of come back to more of our full brain instead of just our brain stem,
Mhm.
then wonderful. But if it's like they're refusing to engage that at all,
Mhm.
there's not really too much of a point in pushing it. It's
Right, it's
probably just
better.
going to make them more mad.
Right, right. So
Yeah.
there is justice in just kind of saying, "Let's table this and talk about
Yeah.
it tomorrow." Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
this conversation has been so helpful, new best friend. I am
I'm so
so
glad it's been helpful.
I am so excited to just share the tips, tools, and strategies for helping all of us, whether you've been through trauma
Yeah.
specifically or not.
Yeah.
It's overcoming the overwhelm. How can
Hmm.
we work with you? Can you share more about this
Yeah.
somatic wellness collective? Is that
Yes,
how?
I'd love to.
Yes, is that how
Yeah.
someone could work with you?
Yes, that would be great. Yes, yeah, because I'm not like currently taking new clients. I'm definitely at capacity there. However, I'm such a nerd and love all the nervous system stuff that I actually created this little online learning community.
Yeah.
And so it is very accessible. So there's like on-demand classes that you can take. We have 2 live classes every month that includes like like meditative movement.
Mhm.
It includes guest speakers, Q&As, all kinds of things there. You get a workbook every month to help you kind of integrate what you're learning to your personal life.
Yep.
And then we have a Facebook community. So it's been a really sweet crew of people. And I actually gave Dana a coupon code to get
Yeah.
$20 off. So if anyone's interested in joining, we'd absolutely love to have you.
I love that. I will put the link in the show notes below for the collective, and you can use the promo code Stop Faking Fine to
Yep.
save $20 off per month on
Yep.
your practice. And I will link all of your socials everywhere, but we can essentially find you on the gram at Dr.
Yep.
CB Therapy, correct?
You got it. That's
And
me.
that's for Christine Baker. So CB
Yes.
Therapy. And yes, like this has been amazing. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for being here, for sharing your story, and just for
Of course.
helping all of us, right?
Yes.
Learn another tip, another strategy for
Yes.
managing the overwhelm because it's real. And
It
I
is.
think at the end of the day, we have to give ourselves grace. So
Mhm.
for you listening, give yourself grace, give yourself a high five, and applaud yourself for the things that you have done well today, because that helps to
Mhm.
lower your cortisol hormone so that you
I
can
love it.
lean in to the rest of these tools and strategies. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thanks, Dana, for having me.